Welcome to the Grit Blueprint Podcast.
I'm your host, Stefanie Couch. This podcast is about branding, building, and business. It also highlights the grit that it takes to be successful in business and in life. Let's get started. Welcome to the Grit Blueprint Podcast with Stefanie Couch. I am so excited to have my guest here today, Abby Cornelius. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
And we are both women from the construction industry. We met on LinkedIn, and we actually have similar business names, which is really cool. I have Build Women and you have Building Women Society. So I feel like we're like basically the same type of brainwaves, which when we connected a few weeks ago, it was really exciting to talk to you, and you have such a cool story. So I'm really excited for the audience to hear this today.
Yes, I feel like we are sisters from another mister, right? We've got similar paths and similar stories, but yours being more on the construction side of things and mine more in the actual home building. So very excited
cool how that kind of changes. But the stories, you hear the same stories a lot in this industry, especially being women in the industry, which is good and bad at the same time.
Yep.
Well, tell me a little bit about you and your journey, how you've come through the home building side and what you're doing now, because I think what you're doing is just so exciting and helping so many people.
Thank you. Yeah. So I started back in 2005. I did a sales internship with Ryan Homes, one of the top 5 national home builders. My cousin was working for them. She was selling houses and she was loving it. And she's like, you've got to do this. Don't go into finance. So boring. You need to be selling houses. So instead of doing my finance summer intern at a bank here in Charlotte, I went and worked for a home builder. And I got to experience during that internship a little bit of sales, a little bit of construction, a little bit of office time and some mortgage time, which was really cool. But I loved the sales side. I loved working in the models, and I actually stayed on through college. I worked full time for my last year and a half of school, graduated, went onto the sales floor, did that for many years. And then I went into sales training. So I was one of the regional sales trainers, training all the new hires for the organization, did that for several years, loved it, went back into sales for a minute. And then went into sales leadership and really found a love for helping develop people long term. When I was a regional trainer, it was focused more on just that new hire onboarding and making sure they have those foundational skills. But as a sales leader, I got to invest in the long-term growth of people and really kind of got addicted to that, but also started to see the bigger picture of the industry and the business as a whole, and found a spark and a passion for operations in general. And so I went on a training and development plan to kind of grow within the organization and found myself in a land position. So as a general manager of land acquisition, I did that for a little less than a year and was on a path to be a division president. And I realized, oh my gosh, this isn't my path. I felt called to do something very different. And I found myself taking all of these coffee chats and lunch dates with ladies who were like, Abby, how did you do it? How did you get here? How did you get that job? How did you get that position? You know, how did you handle this situation? Or I'm about to interview. And I loved every minute of it. And so I became this like little guru inside my organization of just like, ask me anything, right? And I'm going to help you figure it out. But I loved it so much that I found myself overbooking and I wasn't doing my real job so much as I should have been at that time. And I'm like, you know what? I need to do this full time. I felt really, really called. The reason why I wanted to be a division president was I wanted to pave the way for more women. I know there's so many out there that have done big and wonderful things, but in my particular organization, there just wasn't many women. And so often it limited my belief in myself, not seeing them. So as my confidence grew, I'm like, oh, I can do this. I can be this for these other ladies. But what I realized was the busier you are and the higher you rise, the less time you actually have to come alongside and help these ladies. You may be a figurehead and a face of inspiration, and Lord knows we need those. But I really felt called to come more alongside of women and help them get where they wanted to go as well. So I took the leap 2 years ago and I started my coaching business where I work alongside ladies in the home building industry and I help them carve their own path and build their teams and get to that next level that they're looking to get to.
It's amazing. Your path is so cool because you've really done a little bit of everything with ops and sales and training. And you have this beautiful like puzzle piece that you've put together to be really ready to talk to a lot of these women that are doing all different things. So that path is really cool, I think, to pave with different opportunities because most people have either a sales path or ops path. A lot of times I don't see people go in and out. So it's cool that you've done that. And I'm sure you're helping so many people with all those skills combined. And tell me a little bit more how women can work with you, because I know you have a very specific path that you're putting people through that's really working, and you have a community. Talk a little bit about that and what it looks like.
Yeah. So my coaching program is called the Building Women's Society. It's a 5-month coaching program to start, but almost all of my ladies stick it out and stay with me and keep working together after that. But for those first 5 months, we really dig into where are you today and where do you want to go? We work on creating that plan to get you there, and then I hold you accountable for action. One of the things that I felt was really missing when I was working for these big corporations was they had a lot of great training resources available to you, but there wasn't a lot of real-time feedback. So I may go away for like a new manager training for week 1 of being a new leader, but I haven't experienced anything of being a leader yet.
Yeah.
So get me in there 6 months and I'm like, wait, what did so-and-so say at that training? Like, how am I supposed to do a performance improvement plan? And then I'm like trying to get my boss. They're not really sure. They tell you to talk to HR. HR is like, well, didn't you take the class? You're like, somebody just help me. How do I have this conversation?
Yeah.
And so what I provide within the Building Women's Society is like real-time chats like this, face-to-face one-on-ones, where you can bring me all the things, right? You've got performance improvement questions. You have an upcoming pitch you want to make to your boss. I have a lot of ladies that report to C-suite. So their bosses are so busy that there's not somebody there to have these coaching and development conversations. And they want to show up great for their boss because their boss is a C-suite executive, right? So they do coaching with me so we can help work things out. We can map it out. We can make the biggest impact possible so that when they present, it goes really, really well. So we do that within the program. There's the one-on-one component with me, but there's also a group component, because another thing that I realize is not every organization has a strong network of ladies to rely on.
Yeah.
And for me, I had phenomenal male mentors, like so many that really wanted to support me, but sometimes they'd give me advice and it fell flat.
Yeah.
Right. Or it's like, that doesn't really resonate with me, or I'm not really going to do that. And so it took me finding some female mentorship to really find that right click for me. So within my program, I offer group coaching calls as well. So we meet once a month where you get to hop on a call with other ladies in the industry, realize you're not alone, share best practices, learn and grow together. And then they get to connect outside of the group too, however they want, to grow and increase their network as well. So it's been a really amazing thing to kind of watch unfold and watch that ripple effect happen, as I'm sure you do too. Once you start coaching people and connecting people, it's kind of beautiful.
Yeah, it is. And some of the best friends that I've had in different spaces have met in a group like this, where what you get from the mastermind or the coaching program or whatever it is also these collaborative partners or friends that understand what you're going through, especially as a new entrepreneur. You know, we both have been in about 2 years. Leaving corporate to become an entrepreneur can be very lonely. And that's been a big part of it for me. And I think for other women also, I know with my network, part of what I wanted to have was a community where people felt like it was a safe space to go discuss issues, where even if you had a really awesome female mentor or male mentor in your company, you might not always feel comfortable asking that question, especially if they're your superior and you're reporting to them. To have a person that's just somebody that's at another place that understands the industry to say, hey, what would you do if this was you? Or, hey, this happened. What do you think? What would your advice be? Just have conversations without being scared of what happens retaliation wise, or even just judgment wise. That was a big thing for me. When I looked around and there wasn't anybody that looked like me or thought like me, who do you ask? Like you said, it didn't resonate with you. It's like, hey, well, this is what I did. Well, number one, a lot of times it was like 25 years ago when they did this thing.
Right.
Even if they were a woman 25 years ago, it would have been very different than what happens today, right? I mean, the world has just changed a lot.
Yeah, for sure.
And the trajectories change and paths change. So I think finding someone who's maybe been in it like 2 to 3 years before you, that's doing something similar to what you're trying to do 2 years ago, that's a little easier path to see, like, okay, this is kind of where I could do this similar thing.
Well, yeah. And for me, like having the time to really just be invested in growing this network and connecting with women. Like I had one of my coaching clients came to me and she's like, hey, I've got this big interview coming up. You know, what happened when you were there? And I'm like, hey, look, my big interview, that was several years ago. We need to know what their hot buttons are today. Let me find out who recently had that interview. And I just started texting and calling people. And I found somebody who just had the interview with the same people she's going to interview with.
Wow.
just a few weeks ago, and I got them on a Zoom call together. I'm sitting there taking notes so I can help coach her through all the stuff that we're learning. But that's the power of your network. No woman or anybody, nobody should have to go into these things alone. And you're so right. You're going to ask somebody in your organization and you're going to get their bias filter on it, or you're going to get the PC answer. Like, I'm always like, can you just like talk to me like a real person? Don't be a corporate robot. Yeah. Or they'll say that. Like, I even had one boss, I loved him for this, but he's like, okay, this is my Abby's boss answer, but like, I'm going to take that hat off. Can I give you my Abby friend answer? I'm like, could we just have started with the Abby friend answer? Like, that would have been great. But you don't get that level of candor all the time, that level of honesty within your organization.
And you cannot blame these leaders. I mean,
no.
I talk a lot about, entrepreneurship gives certain things, and you have certain things as a boss in an entrepreneurship role. You have certain things as a corporate leader. You have certain things as a C-suite corporate leader. These businesses are there to continue to grow and thrive as large businesses. A lot of them are publicly traded. I mean, that's where I worked. I think Ryan also is publicly traded. They have certain things that they have to do, and there's certain answers they have to give sometimes, and they have derivatives down from the top to do it this way, and this is what we're looking for. It can't always be super candid, and you understand from their perspective, like why they're also protecting themselves and their job. And that's why you need outside influences. Yeah. And for people that are listening to this, I think one thing I would say to anyone, but especially women, is do not get so wrapped up in your company logo, your job title you're in now, your day-to-day that you're in, that you lose sight of the bigger picture of your career, prioritizing your job and your duties today and where you are, that you don't build a network outside of that, and that you also don't think about what's next, whether it's in that company or somewhere else. That is something I see so many women focus in on, and they get laser focused in on that day-to-day. And then they turn around and they want to get moved up. They want to go to a different company, and they haven't prioritized their development at all. Yeah. And you cannot wait on your company to prioritize that for you. You have to own that. It is your life, your career, your development. You have to own it.
Yeah, I would absolutely reinforce that. So I worked with Ryan Homes for 13 years the first time I went back. But I stayed for so long because I wasn't sure what I was capable of. Yeah. I second guessed it, right? Or I was in, that bubble of, well, I'm doing really good. They know I want this. It's going to happen soon, right? And I didn't advocate enough for myself, and I didn't think too big picture. I'm like, I was born here, right? Like, I was a college student. Like, they knew me as 20-year-old Abby. Like, I felt like it was almost like, we say like work family, and I do love working with people I love, but it was almost like too safe that I wasn't growing. And I finally had to get the courage to say, hey, this is one builder. This is one way. If I'm going to be in this for the long haul, I need to see different ways of operating. Yeah. And I knew enough to know that they operated different than most home builders, and that was limiting my career opportunities moving forward. It was also limiting the value I could bring to that organization because I only knew one way. And I think we discredit that when people do tip their toe in other waters and other industries, they bring a wealth of information back to ours. Yeah. And so I transitioned and went to work for Taylor Morrison, another national builder, but a totally different, could not have picked a polar opposite. It was actually in my interview, the area president was like, Abby, I'm concerned. We're so different from Ryan Homes. Like, why? And I'm like, that's the appeal for me. Like, I want to see something different. I don't want to stay in my comfort zone. I need to explore. I need to see something different. They were different in a cultural aspect. They were different in a business mindset. They did inventory. Ryan Homes only ever did dirt build, like to be built. So it was a whole different world for me. And I came in an acquisition, and I kind of just like threw myself into all this uncomfortable stuff. But I'm going to tell you, those were two of the biggest years of growth for me, and also reinforce how much I actually knew. Because when you're in that, it's kind of like, when your mom and dad tell you you're great, you're like, okay, you're my parents. I kind of got like that because I was at that company for so long. So it's like, yeah, you think I'm great, but like, of course you think I'm great. You taught me. I've worked for you for forever, right? I almost needed that validation from outsiders to understand the value that I actually was bringing to my organization.
That's a really good point. And I think that we often don't take opportunities seriously because we feel so comfortable where we are. And
Yeah.
like I always say a lot, comfort is a blanket that the devil wraps us in to keep us from our full potential. It's like a
Oh,
safety blanket.
yeah.
And I really believe we do that to ourselves because it's scary to go do something else. Like, what if you had gone to Taylor Morrison and you weren't as good as you thought you were? Like,
Yeah.
it could happen, right? And
Yeah.
you know what? The answer that I like to think of myself is, you know what? I would have figured it out and I would have become that person at that place doing that other thing. Or I decide, like, no, this isn't the right thing, and you go do something else. But at the end of the day, if you don't ever try it, what if you're better at that new thing than you were at the old thing? Like,
Yeah.
what if it fits more like a glove than the old thing that you thought fit like a glove? And
Yeah.
that's what growth is, and that's what life is about, is challenging yourself. And I truly believe that people that come from that mindset of, hey, I'm going to continue to challenge myself. I'm going to fail. I'm going to look stupid. I'm going to feel stupid. And then I'm going to figure it out and I'm going to keep getting better. And then in a year or two, I'm going to be like, wow, I'm really good at this. But that first 6 months in a new job, especially when you really flip it on its head, that is scary. And
Yeah.
kudos to anyone that has the guts to go out there and do that, because it really does take some guts.
Yeah, it's one of those big transition periods in your life, going to a new organization or going to a new role. I always say, like, give it 3 months to figure out what you know and don't know, and then you got to give it another 3 to determine if you even like it. Don't make that decision in the first 3 months because it's just straight chaos. But it is, you're right, it's about 6 months of like, what did I do? Can I get my feet under me? But I gotta tell you, like, I'm kind of a change junkie. I looked back at my LinkedIn profile because somebody was like, oh, Abby, do you change jobs often? And I was like, yeah, I stayed with the same company. I think I changed like every 2 years. Like, I would just get an itch and be like, I need to go to a new market, or I need to go work for somebody different, or I need to try a new seat. And I watched this video once. It was by the woman CEO, I think it was of Disney at the time. And she started as a low level person within the organization, and she climbed really, really quick. And somebody asked her, like, why do you think, or how do you think you got to this level so quickly? And she said, I'm just so curious.
Yeah.
And she would just explore everything. So she's like, why do we use this camera? And they're like, well, it's just the camera we've always used. Well, why have we always used it? Like, is there a better camera? Do we need to talk to somebody else? Is there like something different we could be doing? And I think that curiosity always gets the better of me. And my mom always said, like, the answer is always no unless you ask. Like, I feel like you just have to try, because otherwise you're just stuck where you are. And what's the harm in trying, right?
I agree. I've always thought it's funny. They always say curiosity killed the cat, which is like, I could not disagree with that more. Like, curiosity, like, got the cat food, and curiosity got the cat a better place to live. And like, curiosity is literally what makes the cat. Like, maybe it kills the cat, but that is like, I don't know where that saying came from, because it's such bullshit. Like,
it was a way to get kids to calm the hell down. That's what it was.
Somewhere was like, did you see that cat that got run over? Like, that was curiosity.
But also, a cat discovered he has 9 lives because he went out there and tried. And I think we think we're going to die all the time, and we're not. We got 9 lives. And I have to say, I have committed career suicide so many times, and I came back from it. I've self-demoted myself. I left, an organization where I was in really good standing. Like, I've done all of these things, and guess what? It wasn't career suicide. I left a corporate job on the cusp of like a huge promotion, and it didn't kill me. It didn't kill me.
Yeah, and you have to sometimes leave good to get to great, and you don't know what good is and what great is until you take that leap. And like you said, with the entrepreneurship leap, it is a leap and it is a risk. But staying in the same job and staying where you are complacent and not doing anything to change, that's also a risk. And I feel like the last few years after post-pandemic, when now like the employer is kind of back in the seat of, maybe not so much with construction, but especially with tech and all these things, a lot of these layoffs that are happening, like, it shows you that you have to have skills and networks that are outside this little bubble you're in. You got to be ready for anything, and changing and challenging yourself, that helps you be ready for anything. I think that's a huge thing. Curiosity may be like the word that I think describes that the best, what you said, but also resiliency is being able to handle that bounce back of maybe you didn't do what you thought you were going to do at that job, or maybe you handled a situation a horrible way, and now you get some other chance to go back and do it again. That's what I think is really important for people to know.
Yeah, I think this industry, that's like one of the big skills that you need is that resiliency and that adaptability because it's always going to be changing.
Yeah,
And you
absolutely.
cannot expect what worked last time to work this time. I mean, sure, try it, but don't
Yeah,
be surprised if it doesn't work. Like, and that's why I think you have to almost be like a personal development junkie to
yeah,
thrive in this industry because
I
you
think
have
so.
to be on top of what's happening next. You know, in my world, I deal a lot with the sales side of things, and people will say, like, tech's gonna replace sales, people don't promote it, like all this like
Mhm.
chatter. And I'm like, stop it. Like, this is absolute noise. Build better value, add more value, your job is secure. And one of my friends, Anya, she works in tech and home building, and she said, I don't remember who quoted it, so we'll have to like go down a rabbit hole to figure out where she got it from, but she quoted somebody else saying, technology is not going to replace the salesperson, but the salesperson that uses technology will.
Yeah, absolutely. And I
And
believe that in marketing. I believe that in any
across
AI
the
because
board. Yeah.
it's true. Like it's like the person riding a horse versus driving a car. It doesn't matter how much you upgrade that horse, it's never going to be as fast as a car. But a
Yeah.
person driving the car can always get better because the cars keep getting better, right?
Yeah.
And that's the thing with tech. Like I'm speaking on AI in a few weeks at a conference. People are scared of AI. Some people are. Some people are already innovating and using it. But people that early adopt AI, they will just be a lot better than the people that say no, 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 because it's coming and you will eventually have to figure it out. Or
Yeah.
it'll be like Blockbuster and Kodak,
Yeah.
they will be gone eventually,
Yeah.
but you will have to know that these people up front that are interviewing that have all these amazing skills with tech, they're going to lap these people that refuse to do it.
Yeah.
So that's what I tell people is don't be scared of it. Figure out how you can make it work for you. Don't use it by itself. Use it with your amazing brain and your superpowers to
Yeah.
fill in gaps and also save yourself time.
Yeah. And then, kind of on that same vein, from a leadership perspective, I think you need to adopt how to manage the different generations.
Yeah.
And so, as technology is coming on board, I'm hearing a lot of new people saying, hey, do we do this? Should we do this? And then there's this disconnect between like boomer
Mhm.
and like, I guess what's after boomer? It
Gen
was
X.
Gen X. Yeah, I don't want to say Gen Z, right? Because that's the newbies. So
Yeah.
Gen X. So after you've got boomers and Gen Xers as like current senior leadership, but then you have millennials and even some Gen Zers coming into, the employment thing, and there's this huge disconnect. Like, we want to
Yeah.
use technology. I just talked to this lady. She's a C-suite executive for a legal firm. So
Mhm.
everybody she works with is boomer.
Yep.
And she's HR, and she's like, I can do this, I can do this, I can do all this stuff, and I can automate. And they're like, whoa, whoa, whoa.
Yeah.
Easy. We do payroll the paper way.
Yeah.
She's like, so I have to drive into the office because you want to keep paper payroll. Like, so we have to find this way to like sit down, figure it out. Where's our common ground? Because I get it, right? All the boomers are going to retire anyway. So some of them you're not going to teach an old dog new tricks.
Sure.
That's fine. But we do need to find a way to manage and lead these different generations too, because there's just such a huge disconnect in how we lead, what our expectations are and what theirs are coming into the field. And it becomes this, they're entitled and they're boomers. And we need to like marry that somewhere along the line, because there's a lot to learn from these folks who have been in this industry for a long time. We need that institutional knowledge from them. And so we need to break down those walls so we can get it. But there's also a lot to learn from these young people. Like, my kids can do freaking anything on a computer.
I know. And
it's like half the time I'm like, this broke. How do I fix it? Like, help mom. Like, we should be using that. Don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid of it.
Well, and I think that boils down to ego on both sides and finding, like you said, that common ground of, boomers can't think Gen Z are stupid and Gen Z can't think boomers are stupid. And I think there is sort of an underlining tone of that because we are both stupid in
our respective areas.
Yeah. In our own areas. So like boomers may not understand AI, but Gen Z doesn't understand how to build a $100 million business because they haven't done it. So how do we combine those superpowers? It's just like when I talk about strengths development, if your strengths are polar opposite to mine, it doesn't make you less valuable to me. It makes you more valuable because if I already have the skill, I don't really need you. But if I don't have the skill at all, boy, I really need you, right?
Yeah.
How do you look at it from that way and take your ego out of it and look at it as a strength and a weakness combining to make something that's really good?
Yeah.
And also we have to be willing to have that change on the organizational side, even from a development standpoint. How we train and develop boomers and Gen X will not work for Gen Z. It's not working for millennials. That's how things like what you and I are doing, organizations can bring people in that are doing it a little different way, pay them, and not have to reinvent the wheel in their business.
Yes.
Let someone else, if you don't want to teach an old dog new tricks, that's fine. Hire someone else to come help you do it.
Right.
That's where those, even on the marketing side, I am doing a lot of marketing automation for people, helping them automate text campaigns and Google review campaigns and social media and all these branding things and LinkedIn and all this stuff. You as an owner do not have to understand that to the minutia level to utilize and automate things in your business. Someone needs to understand it, but it doesn't have to be the CEO that doesn't care. And it shouldn't be the CEO. It should be someone else. So you just got to use those tools. And I think as we start to look at the environment as fluid as it is and is going to continue to be with more people retiring, I really feel like that next generation of leaders, if it's Gen X that's coming in, I feel like they're more adaptable from even a diversity standpoint of women in the industry.
Yes.
There is so much more of a I don't know the answer, but let's figure it out. And I'm probably going to be wrong, and I'm willing to be wrong and kind of look a little stupid. And I feel like that generation is more apt to do that. And
and this is one of the other big disconnects, right? Like the millennials and the Gen Zers want to collaborate.
Yeah.
Right. Let's collab, bro. Right. Yep. I want to collab with you, Stefanie. Like, this is just our generation. This is what we want to do. Where the boomers don't. They're like, they like the hierarchy. They like the separation and the order. And that makes everybody, that makes everybody happy and comfortable in their little houses. But that's what this generation needs. And that's also how they need to be trained and coached and onboarded. Yeah. And so I see a lot of disconnect of keeping people in these silos and creating these competitive environments. Gen Z is not going to thrive in that. No. And you're going to lose your boomers to retirement, and you're going to have nobody to come in and fill the gap if we don't get that, those Gen Xers and older millennials like myself to try to bridge that gap a little bit smoother and find different ways to lead, coach, train, develop, and innovate. I'm so excited for the era that we're in with home building because I feel like it's taking way too long to get here. Yeah. I mean, even when I started in home building in 2005, we didn't have a company website. I didn't have a computer. We literally used fax machines and Rolodexes, which is insane. And it was insane back then. I remember being like, why did I take Microsoft Suite classes if I don't even have Microsoft Suite at this big fancy job I got, right? And I was literally handing out Abby Winey at Gmail, or I was probably Hotmail back then, was the email I was giving to customers. We just took so long to get on the boat. And now I feel like we're getting on it, but there's still this fear around it. How do we control it? How do we, protect our information, which I get that, right? Every company wants to protect their information, but also what's the return? What's the return? What's the return? These are all the questions I hear all the time.
I think that's a really cool conversation that I think we all have, with the fax machine thing. I still know some people that don't have a website that are really profitable businesses,
which is fine.
Right? Yep. And they just don't need it. And that is the conversation, though, is what happens when all your clients that are boomers that are running these businesses sell to a millennial that is going to do what? They're going to Google you. And you're not there. You're not on a Google business page. You're also not on a website, or either your website is atrocious. And I see some websites and I'm like, I can't believe this is real life. I sometimes screenshot, I'm like, this is amazing. It's actually an artifact when you find it. But when you look at their business, and if you looked at their P&L, you would understand why they don't value it, because they don't need it. But what's going to happen is what's about to come, and the people who are going to be buying from them, they will need it. And so you're going to have this little lull, and then it's going to be like a drop off a cliff. I believe that's what it's going to be. The people who prioritize marketing and social media and some of these things that maybe really they did not move the needle for a lot of companies. And so I understand why these companies are like, look at our P&Ls, from 2020 to 2022, who cares? We don't need a website because we're turning customers away. We don't even have the houses to sell. We don't have the building materials to sell. We don't have roofers to send to these jobs. Yeah. Now that's starting to curtail anyway. But with the new customers being these next generations, 75% of the workforce is going to be millennials next year. 75%. That means that there are a lot of the buyers that are going to be buying these projects, these houses, they're going to be millennials. We Google things. Is there anything you don't Google? I mean, honestly.
No, my husband won't even let us buy it if it doesn't have X amount of Google reviews that are X stars and above, right? Like we want the feedback, and we want to know that it's real and it's legit. And if you come across, like I do this, if I come across a website, I'm like, ooh, this is sus. I don't know if they're real or not.
And the sad part is that I actually have some clients and some people that I work with that I know are like, they're amazing at what they do. Like world-class suppliers, world-class distributors, amazing at what they do. But they have like 30 Google reviews and they're not really very great. And that's because if you're not prioritizing getting those reviews from your clients, then most people that leave a Google review is when it's not good, right? If you're not trying to get Google reviews. That means that when you go on Google and you see, all 2 stars or 3 stars, it's because somebody wasn't happy. But if you're trying to get those reviews and you're automating that process, then you have 1,000, those 2 bad reviews don't matter. Right. That's what people have to think about. And it's getting that mindset to shift. And just like with training and development, that didn't used to be as big of a priority. It was a nice to have. It is no longer a nice to have. It is a must have. Yeah. And if people like us can collaborate, and that's another fun point that I like to make. It's like we have 2 very similar businesses. I have a marketing business too, but our business even has a similar name. In theory, like we probably shouldn't be having this conversation because we could be seen as competition. But in my mind, number one, what we're doing is different and what we offer is different and who we are is different. Yeah. But I feel like I'm more powerful because you are there.
Oh, that's sweet.
And I think that when we have 10% women in the industry, there is not enough women in the world that could be competing against each other to make it where there's not enough market to possibly go out there and everybody eat and feast on whatever's there and make the world and impact a better place.
Yeah. So, and I think we need to ditch the whole scarcity mindset anyway. Yes. Like I'm the same way, right? Like I get people on my podcast all the time, like we're kind of in the same vein, but let's support each other because I may resonate with you. I may not. And if I don't, I still want you to get the support you need from whoever that is. And maybe in a different season of your life, we'll come back around and that's fine. Yeah. But I remember early in my sales career, I'd be so scarcity, right? Like, oh, I don't want them going to the competitor. I don't want them going to that model across the street from that other builder. And it's like, but why? Like there's always more than enough to go around. Yeah. And if I'm doing my best, I'll always get more than my fair share regardless. So I just need to, again, add more value, care, give a shit. It's always going to come back to you. And we should be celebrating and promoting one another because there's no harm in that. And if Coke and Pepsi can both be successful, we all can be successful. It doesn't have to just be one person that gets the opportunity.
And I'll tell you, early in my career, I was the same way. I was like, look, there's not going to be very many women that get promoted around here. Like I made that pretty early on. Like if anybody gets up the chain, it's going to be a miracle and it's going to be me. Like you better believe it's going to be me that breaks that barrier. And I wanted to do it so other women could do it too, but I didn't want them to do it in spite of me, because there was only one spot. You're young and you start to think of it as like a beauty queen type mentality. Like I'm getting the sash and the crown. And so there wasn't much that I wouldn't do. I mean, I don't feel like I was a real mean girl, but I do think there was a real competitive advantage there. Like I'm good and I'm going to get the spot. And then I started to look around. I'm like, oh my God, like this is not a good place to be a woman. And why would any other woman even want to be here? Not just the company I was in, but in general, the environment of the whole industry. Yeah. And so I started looking around and thinking if someone comes to me and wants help, and just like you said, I got so much joy from being able to help someone with a situation that maybe I had already encountered and they wanted to know and I was helping them. And then I started to feel like I never want another woman to feel alone like this again. I felt so alone. Yeah. That was my breaking point, was when I figured out whatever I do is not going to affect them and whatever they do is not going to affect me unless it can be in a positive way. If I'm going to get this job, I'm going to get it regardless because of who I am and what the company needs. And if I don't, it won't be because I helped some other woman along the way. It'll be because of whatever happens. Yeah. And so once you unlock that key in your life, I feel like it's huge. And I had someone ask me the other day, why are you starting another women's organization when there's X, Y, and Z? And it's like, guys, we need, we're not even close to.
One doesn't cover it. In case you were wondering, one women's organization does not check the box of what women need.
It's I understand the valid question of what is the difference? Yeah. But but to say that is like, well, there's already Nike out there, so like no one ever should make another running shoe because like there's already one. What if my foot doesn't fit Nike? What if I don't like the way they look? What if whatever? It doesn't matter. People have brand preferences just like they have community preferences. And just like you said with coaching, someone may hate my style. I'm very direct. I'm very X, Y, and Z. Someone may love it. And if they don't love me and they love you, then that's amazing because they get what they need from someone.
Right.
And I just like to cover that because I want other women and men to hear that. But especially, I believe women, they struggle with self-worth, confidence, asking for what they're worth. So when they're doing something like this, they're asking for like, very small amount of money to not ask for what they're worth. And then secondarily competing with each other with scarcity mindset.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've had a lot. It's so funny. So my platform is, supporting women, obviously, but I love men. We couldn't get here without them. Like they built my career. So many, male mentors is how I got here. But I'll get like shade in my DMs being like, well, women are worse to women than men. Men aren't the problem. It's women on women. I haven't had a bunch of that in my career, but that's because there were literally no women. So I didn't have to deal with
cut down by a woman when there are no women.
I didn't have that complex, but like, I feel like, apparently this is a thing, right? Women on women. I had one lady in my career who wasn't a fan of me, but I really think it was just because we had a personality conflict. I wasn't going for her job and I don't think she was threatened by that, but like, whatever, you're just not going to get along with everybody. That's fine. Yeah. But I do think that this must be a thing, right? Where there's this competitive vibe with women, but I've also like never been that girl, thankfully.
Yeah.
I hope nobody ever got that vibe from me. Because
and I think it's just how competitive you are. Like, I really feel like it's trying out for the, the team. And if there's only one spot on the team, it doesn't matter who's going up against you. You're going to fight to win that spot. And I think when there's so few spots for women, even if that's not like set in stone, that's like a implied thing. But when you look around and there's no one else like you, there's not like a real lineup like, oh, the odds of me getting this are really good. So if I'm going against another woman, it probably doesn't matter. That's not how it is when there's only one of you or there's none of you. So I think to be the first and the only is really hard. And I also believe if we somehow can utilize these amazing male allies and like you just said, I've had a lot and still have a lot of people in my life and career that have really fostered and grown me and also helped me get spoken of in rooms that I wouldn't have ever been talked about. And those were men because there were no women in that room to tell my name. So that is a thing I'm really grateful for. And I always try to mention is like, this is not a man bashing, like love women only type deal. We have to have all of these people in the organization. Diversity is important, but you're never going to not have men around that are supporting you, hopefully, because you need that.
Yeah. I went to a professional women in building event here in Charlotte recently. And one of the guys came up to me afterwards and he's like, so what can I do as a male ally? I'm like, that's such a beautiful question. Like that just like made my heart so happy. He's like, I don't even know what to do. He's like, I don't want to do it wrong. How do I do it right? And that was the exact advice I gave him, Stefanie, was think of the women in your office who are doing great and amazing things. Bring up their names in room where it matters. And he was like, that's it. I said, that's it. And also invite them to lunch. He's like, oh my God, I can do that. He's like, you would not be surprised how many times all the guys would just go out to lunch. And it took one guy who was like, always like, hey, Abby, hey, to the other girl in the office, do you guys want to come? And I said to him one day, I said, thank you so much for inviting us because it has felt like this divide. And he's like, oh, well, these guys are so worried about HR issues if they invite you to lunch. It's not because they don't like you. I'm like, I know they like me. We have a great time together. But there's all these like weird things that are happening in this men versus women dynamic. So just those simple things do go a long way to help us feel included. Because I'm going to tell you, when I started going to those lunches with the guys, I was in conversations that mattered. I had to listen to a whole bunch of football talk that I could have gave two shits about. But I also heard, hey, this new community is opening up. Like, we're going to be doing this. Do you want to help with this? I wouldn't have been asked to help with it if I wasn't at that lunch, right? At that working lunch. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on there. And then I want to say for the women who are in the environment where it's not you against another woman, it's you against a bunch of men, which is kind of more where I stood. Be very careful about losing yourself in that environment. Because that's what happened to me, where I felt like I had to mirror these men to get where I wanted to go because, oh, well, if he's doing that and it's rewarded, then I need to do that. And I started mirroring behaviors that weren't me and wasn't authentic and it didn't feel right. And then if
Yeah.
I did get, an opportunity, it felt like, well, did they give that to me because I was being like Joe, or did they give that to me because it was Abby? And the
Yeah.
more I started stepping into my authenticity and being a little bit more bold about who I was, things actually started moving faster for me because I think I was coming across more genuine, right? And bringing my ideas, but I was so afraid to do that for so long because I didn't see anybody else acting, saying, and doing the things I was doing. So it made me think it wasn't accepted, but it just hadn't been done yet. So that's one of the things I love to do with my coaching ladies is like, find your authentic voice, find out what differentiates you from your peers, your coworkers, your quote unquote competition, and step boldly into who you are. And then get that job because they loved you, not because they loved who you faked or pretended you had to be to get there.
Yeah, because you're not going to like the result if it's from a non-authentic too. And I talk about that a lot with branding, like on LinkedIn, and helping people figure out what to say and what do I post and what do I talk about. And it's easy for you to fall into that, like, well, I saw Abby do it and Abby has X amount of followers and she's getting all this business from it. But if you do it like Abby and you're not Abby, it's not going to work because it's not who you are. And then after they meet you in real life, they're going to be like, well, this is weird. Like your stuff you post isn't, I never want someone to meet me and be like, oh, that doesn't feel like what I see every day on LinkedIn. I want them to, oh, you're Stefanie. Like that's exactly what I thought you were going to be. Yeah. And that's the thing with your career too, is build your brand, build your job, your career. I bought a management vest one time. I call it management vest, like a Columbia black, zip down vest. Every man on the team wore these every day. Like it was kind of a joke, but it also wasn't. And I bought one day and I was like, I'm going to see how I feel in this. And I put it on and I was like, this is not on my body. I will never.
That's a nope. I can't even imagine. I don't know you that well, Stefanie, but I cannot imagine you in a Columbia zip-up vest.
100% it was not me. I think I wore it like one day. But I actually had that moment in my mind where it's like, if I look like them, I will never look like them. But if I look closer to them instead of like this, then maybe they'll assimilate in their mind that I'm more serious, I'm more professional, whatever. Screw that. That's what I'll tell you. Like, if you have to be that person to be in that place, it is not for you.
So that was the same thing early in my career. Power suits and heels. That's what everybody, all the few women that were there were in power suits and heels, and all the men were in suits. And I'm like, I really hate heels.
Yeah.
I just hate them. They're not my thing. It's not my jam. I like flowy dresses. I like flats. And it took me so long to get out of my head that like, this was what I was supposed to look like at work.
Yeah.
But.
And sometimes that's just implied. And I think we tell ourselves stories. Mm-hmm. And this is not just about clothing. This is about a lot of things. Like the stories that we tell ourselves are almost never true about ourselves or about what someone's thinking about you or what could happen. The worst case scenario almost never happens. Right. I mean, how many times have we as people, women and men, laid in bed and thought like, okay, this person said they need to talk tomorrow. Like, oh my God, I'm going to get this. and it's literally like, hey, do you need another notebook for your office or something like totally ridiculous? You had this whole scenario in your head of like, oh my God, I messed this up. And like 6 months ago, and he's still mad about this. And he's going to come and ask me about, it's like, what are you even talking about? You're just picturing this horrible thing. It's nothing. So what I would say is really think about, what is the worst case scenario? Could you live with it? And if you're not able to show up as yourself at work, then you got to find a place where you can go in every day and be who you are and believe in yourself and know who you are. And then as a leader, I would say, tell your people how you feel about them and what they're doing well. And do it often and do it early. That way, when there is something you need to do, some kind of reprimand or like, hey, could you do this a little different or maybe work on this? You don't have 50 things coming at them of negative and you've never given them a compliment. Yes. People need to hear that they're doing a good job. People need to hear that you care about them, that you look awesome, doing this role, like you killed it, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. That's how you need to show up every day as a leader to be then able to have those hard conversations.
Yeah. And it takes a little intention in slowing down. Like I always try to tell somebody, especially when they come to me, they're like really frustrated with their team. They're not performing well. They're not. I said, look, you see what you expect. And right now you're expecting to see the worst in them because you've had a bad month or a bad couple weeks. Yep. I need you to go in and find something good. You're not allowed to say anything bad about anybody. I want you to catch them doing something good. I want you to celebrate it. and you're going to change the energy because the way you're feeling right now, whether you know it or not, is coming to them in the field.
Yes.
And it is
100%.
only draining them because I'm drained sitting here listening.
Yeah.
And so you're likely draining your team. So catch them doing something good, something rewarding. Also, whenever I go to a new team, I always ask them, like, what are some things that you really loved about past bosses? And what were some of the things that you really didn't like? There is a huge trend, Stefanie, of what I didn't like about my past boss is lack of follow through and feedback.
Yeah.
So and I'll be like, give me examples. And they're like, hey, like they asked me to do a report. I spend all this time on it. I submit it and I don't even get a thank you or it looks good or, no follow-up, no attaboys. And I know that like sometimes you're a leader and it's fast paced and there's a lot coming at you. You told them to do something. They did it, box checked.
Yeah.
You got to slow down and thank them for their time and appreciate the effort or you're not going to get as good from them next time. You're just not.
Yeah. And also give them feedback on did you even use the report? Because again, if somebody spent 20 hours on something, you didn't even look at it.
Yeah.
How do they know if next time they should spend 5 hours versus 20, or if maybe they didn't do the right thing and you had to spend a lot of time working on it and fixing it? Mm-hmm. Show them how to do it right the next time, because I don't want to do work that you don't appreciate. I want to do work that you need and appreciate.
Yeah.
You and millennials and Gen Z are real big on that. And that's the thing I will say, like, we need feedback. Yeah. And most of the time they want words of affirmation. I mean, I know
that's my love language. I'm a words of affirmation. Tell me all the things, good and bad, all of it. So give it to me.
I've heard people say like, you don't always need to be appreciated for everything you do. Well, if that's my love language, then you better figure that out, because it's like patting a dog on the head, like good boy, good girl. Like if you do that to a person that words of affirmation is their love language, like you don't have to give them a raise because you're already giving them what they love. Doesn't mean you can mistreat them and not pay them, but like there are different things for different people, and some people don't care about that. You got to understand how people communicate and what makes them tick. And once you start to do that as a leader or as a spouse or as a friend or whatever, you're a coach, that's where you start to see, like, this is where you see accolades, people really hockey sticking in their growth because you figured out what matters to them.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that I was jotting down before our call is untapped potential in people. Sure. And I think that's your job as a leader, is to find that untapped potential. And sometimes getting the best out of people is the positive affirmations, and it is catching them doing that something good, because people aren't in this industry if there's not a certain degree of hustle and heart in what they're doing. It's a difficult and challenging industry. And if you're going to constantly find the flaws and always pick them apart or avoid them, which I see a lot of leaders doing, is just, I'm too busy. I can't get in the field. I can't give love and attention. You're stifling that potential in them. Mm-hmm. It's that FaceTime. It's that attaboys. It's that, I really loved how you did this, that gears them up. And I think, for me with coaching, that's the biggest thing that I see with the ladies that I coach. They already have the skills. They already know what they need to do and how they need to do it. They just need somebody to cheer them on, celebrate some wins, redirect if they get off course, and hold them accountable to the thing that they know they need to do, right? Yeah. And that is how you unlock their potential. And that's how they grow. It's not rocket science. It's just that we have become so busy. I think a lot of companies are understaffed, which means your middle management, that sandwich level, is working around the clock, and they're not providing the best leadership to their teams. They're sandwiched between those senior leaders in the field, and they're grinding. And then the field staff is not getting the best person that they need to lead them. And so if I can come in and come alongside them and give them that extra support and encouragement that they need, and, some reminders on how to manage their time and how to build better systems, and get them to level up themselves so they can level up their team, it's a game changer. But that potential is already inside of them. They just haven't tapped into it yet.
Absolutely. It's beautiful work that you're doing, and I think it's really important. One thing thinking about that is, for people listening to this podcast, so I'm sure there's going to be men listening, there's women listening. So first question is two-part question. First question is, if you're a leader, a male or female leader that wants to inspire the next generation of women to come into this industry and then keep them, what would you say you hear from your coaching clients? And you sort of just touched on this, but more tangibly, like, what are the top 2 or 3 issues that you're hearing women really come to you with over and over and over, that maybe that leader could key in on and maybe fix, even if it's just one big thing, from the side of a leader with women that are in your organization trying to move up the ranks?
Okay. So there's a couple things. Honestly, there's this disconnect between the perception of what makes a man promotable versus a woman.
Like executive presence.
Yeah. So so there's this like aura, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a really great TED talk on this called The Missing 33%. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I haven't seen that one.
I cannot remember her last name. This is going to drive me crazy because I've been chatting with her. Susan, I'll look it up so we can give her proper credit. But it's called The Missing 33% by Susan. Her last name starts with a C. I just always pronounce it wrong because I'm terrible at grammar. But, and she talks about this fact that for women, we're really good connectors, right? We're really good people connectors. We really tend to make amazing leaders. We're super empathetic. We're vulnerable. We're everything that especially this next generation needs in a leader. Yeah. So we kind of check those boxes naturally, but what we miss is this business and financial acumen. It's that missing 33%. So what I see is a lot of women come to me, they may be buried in, too many things to do. So time management is always going to be an issue, especially for mid-level managers. So I would say senior leaders managing women, check in with them. How many hours are you working? Is there anything I can take off your plate? Is there maybe a meeting you could not have to go to? Because they're not going to speak up. They should, but they're not going to speak up. They're going to say yes to all the things. They want to do well. They don't want to let you down. So, for me, having those conversations with my boss and saying like, hey, I can't be in all 10 of these meetings or I'm not going to get out to my team. Which ones do I have to miss? That was huge for me. But if a leader can start that conversation and say, hey, where's your focus this week? Is there anything I can take off your plate? That would be huge. Even if it's just the permission to not attend, that's a huge relief for some people. Yes. So that's one of the things, the time management portion of it. But there's this perception that they're lacking this business and financial acumen. And so I've heard this a dozen times that men get promoted based on potential, women get promoted based on achievement. Yep. So ladies are hustling really hard to build the stats. We're head down in the job. If I do this job really well and I get all the boxes checked, then I'll be viable for promotion. But really what your leader is looking for is you investing in that next level knowledge. Yep. And so I try to invest a lot of time with ladies on strategic business thinking. How do we drive profitability? How do we drive revenue? How do we increase absorption? Like all these creative levers we can pull from a financial standpoint. So here comes my financial background finally kicking in here. And it's that operational fun part that I really loved of operational leadership and giving them that information, giving them that, okay, let's talk about the financials, what's working, what's not working, and how can you impact that so that they can have business conversations and financial conversations. So they're not just saying, hey, I got you a sale, but I drove this much revenue to the business, or I had this really good idea. And I think this is going to help our days under construction, which is going to increase our return on asset. Like having these more powerful, manly conversations, that is what your boss is really looking to hear from you. But we tend to stay in the emotional team development land, which is also very, very important. I don't try to dismiss this, but they're looking for that missing 33% that the men do naturally because the men get invited to these conversations about that. And I coach my ladies to like, try to get into that conversation. Like, try to get into, sometimes you'll have bosses that hold budgets. They're like, I got this. You don't need to worry about it. No, let me be a part of it. Like I want to level up in this area. I want to understand the financial impact. And when I started doing that, I found a lot of opportunities to provide value. When I took over the marketing budget for my sales team, I was like, why are we still doing this? Why are we still doing this? I saved like $50,000 just by one quick review because they're not in the sales world day to day to know that we didn't need to do that. They're just signing checks, which is terrible. But these are the wins that you can have by injecting yourself into that business and financial acumen, which is going to win you that perception, which I hate to say that, but that's what's missing. There's this disconnect and they're not inviting you to the conversations. Now, great news is I've seen a ton of organizations realizing this is the gap. So this is what I would say. If you're an organizational leader, is invite your women into these business and financial acumen conversations, shed some light on the why behind your decision making. Because I think sometimes senior leaders just want to go, 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 go. Yeah. If you're not sharing the why, we're not gaining the knowledge. And so you're either going to be met with resistance, but you're also missing the opportunity for them to learn and grow.
Yeah, because they can't replicate something later as a leader in that position if they don't understand the method or the strategy to get to that decision. Just saying like, hey, we decided to cut this, it's done. That doesn't mean anything to them, but saying, these are the numbers we looked at. We compared this. We looked at this over 5 years. We thought about the next 5 years. This is why we came to this decision. Well, I can replicate that because that's a formula. And
Yeah.
I do think that's such a good point. Business acumen was always something that I felt like I really needed more of because, again, there is that gap. I was great at sales. I was great as an individual contributor, all these things. Even the team part of it, I could get that. But that business acumen, I always knew that was going to be what held me back, and not having that P&L, like full-time P&L responsibility or whatever it was, that was a big deal. And so if you can help people figure that out, men or women at a younger age, to start to understand.
Yeah.
I remember the first conversation where I heard the word EBITDA. I was like, what the hell is that? I Googled it under the table, because they were throwing these terms around, and I felt really stupid because I didn't know what EBITDA was.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you should never have to feel stupid for not knowing something, because they should be having these conversations like, hey, this is how you're paid, and this is what EBITDA is, and this is what apron wick is, and this is how it actually comes down to the bottom line and what it looks like for you. If you're getting paid on something, you should understand and be trained how that works.
Yeah.
You shouldn't just be taking your commission statement and being like, okay, well, I trust these people.
Yeah, and you'd be surprised. I see a lot of people who are just like, oh, whatever. And I'm like, hey, look, if you want to rise, and if you don't want to rise, that's fine. Stay in your bubble, stay safe. But if you truly want to grow and you're a senior leader and you're like, hey, how can I support more women in this industry? You can acknowledge the strengths that they build, especially, and the value that they bring, especially as leaders, but open those doors for those business conversations. Share some of the financial information with them. We'll get it super quick. We just need somebody to bring us into that conversation. And then that sharing the names in the room that matter. I see these women that do really, really well in their organizations. And I talk a lot about this. Like, I consider myself a coach / mentor, but you still need a sponsor. You still need somebody in your organization who's championing for you. And these women that rise have really great champions within their organization. And so I would encourage that too. Every senior leader should have somebody that they're investing in below them in the organization to help bring them up. And this isn't about playing favorites, but this is about, hey, if somebody wants to go, are they getting the internal support that they need to get where they want to go? And that can be coffee chats, that can be Zooms, that could just be email exchanges every couple of weeks. It doesn't have to be a huge time commitment on your part, but you hold power in these senior leadership positions that I don't think we're always using. And I think that if we can each have somebody that we're advocating for, we're going to bring that diversity to the table. But if it's one person who always brings in their one friend that they think is the next best candidate, it kind of waters down the potential and opportunity for other people in the organization.
Yeah, and really having that opportunity to just ask questions without a whole lot of judgment, or just be in a room and just watch, is invaluable. And we were talking a little bit about lunch, but in my old job, the culture was hunting and fishing. Like, that's what they did, right? And so my company would send customers and employees on these huge fishing trips, hunting trips. It took me 10 years of working there to get invited to a hunting trip. And I missed so much time and effort. I could have been learning, growing, watching these people in action, talking to these customers, understanding them and their business, making huge deals, because it was scary for them to have. And I understand this part of it. I do. The HR reason, well, it's an overnight hunting trip, or we're all on a fishing boat, and when we have to pee, there's no bathroom. What are you going to do? It's weird conversations like that. But at the end of the day, there has to be a way around that to allow women to go and be in these places, because it's actually hurting you and your potential as a company and hurting the women, because that's not happening. But there was two men actually, that finally said, I said, I want to go. And they said, we'll take you.
Yeah.
And so to that person, I'm kind of getting emotional thinking about to that person that finally said, I will take you. Thank you for being the one person that finally said yes. I'm getting emotional.
But that's what people need to hear. It just takes opening that door to make a difference.
One yes. And then guess what? 4 other people got to go on that trip that were women that had never gotten to go. And now I'm hoping that more women get to do that. But that made a big difference to me. That one person said, I don't care what we've always done. I'm going to say yes to this. Yeah. That is how change happens. And you being the brave person that says, whether you're a man or a woman, I will not stand for this anymore. We will change this. Yeah. That is how this industry will change. Yeah. That's how women will come in. Millennials will come in. Gen Z will come in and love this, is if we figure out how to make the old and the new into a beautiful like quilt that matches together to say, we're going to take all this knowledge of the older people, we're going to take all this knowledge of the younger people, and we're going to say, we're going to figure out what the best is. And
Yeah.
it's not either one by itself.
Yeah. Yeah. I
And
love
training
that.
and development and hard conversations are going to be a part of that. Like
Yeah,
it has,
it's so funny. So if I was in an organization today, I'd probably do like a training day where it's like teach a boomer how to TikTok, and then have a boomer teach a millennial or Gen Z or how to run some numbers.
yeah.
You know what
Go
I mean?
over
Like,
the P&L with them.
yeah, like you should have a knowledge share. You know, what's the saying?
Maybe
Like,
you
can't hate
call
up
that for
close.
TikTok.
Yeah, there you go. Like, but you can't hate up close, right? And not that
Yeah.
there's hate going on, but I think there's a lot of misunderstandings.
Yes,
And
100%.
I think if we did sit down and have more like facilitated conversations and knowledge sharing,
Yeah.
people would be impressed with one another and what value they bring.
We all feel like we're so different until, like you said, you get close and you
Yeah.
start to talk, and then you figure out, like, oh, we have the same taste in music, or we like the same X, Y, and Z, or
Yeah.
my mom grew up in the same place that your mom grew up in, or whatever it is. There's always some connection with people if we care enough to find it.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important. I'm so glad we had this conversation.
Me
I
too.
adore you. I think you're amazing.
Thank you.
And
Same.
if anyone is listening to this and is in the realm looking for a coach or a mentor, tell people how they can work with you, tell people where to find you. And I hope that everyone will go and look you up, at least connect with you on LinkedIn, because you post a lot of amazing content.
Thank you.
Instagram too. I see your
Thank you,
stuff.
thank you. Yeah, LinkedIn's my platform of choice. So find me, Abby Cornelius, on LinkedIn, or you can go to my website, abbycornelius.com, and learn all about it. I love to connect. So if you just want to shoot me a DM, we can schedule a call and hop on and get to hear your story and see how I can help. But I'm very accessible. So come out and find me.
And I'm sure this will not be the last conversation we have, because I think there's just so much value that you bring. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing. And I am excited for our next conversation. I hope
Yes.
very
Thank
long.
you,
And hopefully
Stefanie.
we can meet soon in person.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. Well, thank you for joining us on the Grit Blueprint podcast, and we will talk to you on our next episode.